For thousands of years, humanity has searched for the hidden threads connecting spirit, consciousness, science, and the future of our world. Shaman John Rasmussen brings together ancient wisdom, modern insight, and the deeper mysteries shaping human evolution. Welcome to Shaman Radio. Hi, this is John Rasmussen, and I have the pleasure of speaking today with Dr. Randolph Schiffer. And Dr. Randolph Schiffer is a former Marine, a neurologist, a psychiatrist who spent more than 3 decades studying how fear and memory shape the human brain, including serving as founding director of the Cleveland Clinic Center for Brain Health. Today, he brings that clinical insight together with lived parenting experience and storytelling to help families understand how children process difficult emotions. His recent work explores how stories, especially the ones we tell at bedtime, can help children face fear with resilience rather than avoidance. And he's just written the book, Bedtime Stories that Will Frighten Children. So thank you for coming on, Dr. Schiffer. I can't wait to hear your wisdom on this subject. It's something that not only affects parents, but quite honestly, I think this is good for adults. It's never too late to figure out how fear drives us, and how it affects our brain and all that. So thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me, John. I'm anxious myself to hear what I'm going to say.
Perfect. That's what I love. So, when did you get the idea to write this book?
Wait, I got a picture of it here.
Yeah.
Bedtime
great.
Stories That Will Terrify Children. The book comes from a year of stories I told actually about 30 some years ago to our 2 boys. My wife and I had 2 young boys then. We still have them, but now they're big. And at that time in 1990, the older one, who was 3 years old the younger one was 1. The older one was diagnosed with acute lymphocytic leukemia that year in March. I was always in the pediatrics departments. I'd taken care of some of these children. I knew about it. It wasn't good. At that time, ALL, as they call it, had a 50% mortality, as the doctors say. That means half the children died. But I knew it because I'd worked with these children. They didn't all die because of the biology of the disease. A significant number of them died because they were unable, or their families were unable, to take the treatments, which were long and arduous. So I resolved to develop a year-long series of stories that might hopefully help our boy with the leukemia to toughen himself against what lay ahead for him.
Wow, that's amazing. I having been around a lot of children myself, worked with a lot of families, I can tell you as well that being, a little mental toughness and overcoming fear goes a long way. I mean, I think it's something that, you and I think inherently faced it the way we were raised, and we dealt with it, and we didn't talk about it much. There was nobody to really talk to, right? But we learned to overcome fear, mostly the hard way, but I think it serves well in the long run.
Well, I've come to think that it's not just the children with terrible diseases or injuries that need help now with this hardening, resilience, toughening. My concern, John, is that we have really raised in this country 2 or 3 generations of young people who have excessive timidity, anxiety, and fearfulness. And I could give you some stories. Stories are my life now. All right, I'll give one story. Of course, I spent 35 years in the academic medical centers, and I still am in touch with some of them. And I was back at one a couple years ago, and a social function, but the dean of the medical school was complaining to me. They had hired a general surgeon from one of the prestigious general surgery residency programs in the Northeast, Ivy League program, with glowing recommendations, glowing competence reports. But this guy got to the different medical school where I was, and he was afraid to be on call for surgery. He had never operated alone at night. Now, when the 5 years or so that I spent in the hospitals as a resident, I worked more with neurosurge than general surge. But those neurosurgery residents, they operated alone every night that they were on. So something has changed, and I don't think it's for the better.
Right. What is it? The only question I would have is then, how do you overcome that, right? So if you've got people now, and it is, gentle parenting, that's been a huge thing for the last generation or so. And there's a lot of studies around trauma, and I think it's sort of built on that, and our approach has been to protect people from fear and trauma instead of teaching them how to deal with it, right? Because in my work, I've understood that five people can witness the same event and have five different experiences of it, from horror to bliss. And in the military, there's this is obvious, right? You see something horrible happen, and one guy is like freaks out and says, I'll never be the same. Life is dangerous, and this is horrible, and they go home with PTSD as a result. And the other guy says, "Oh, look at that was amazing," and hey, this is war. Stuff happens, and carries on, and he goes home without PTSD typically. So it's once that's happened, though, and you haven't been taught how to perceive danger in a way that you don't become a victim or feel that disassociation, if you will, in that way. How do you heal that? How do you come back from that? Is something like your book a good approach, not just for children, but people of any age? How would you recommend that people get the right perspective and get toughened up again, if you will, such that they don't suffer long-term effects of trauma?
Right. What you're bringing up is the core issue here, I think, which is, how do young people learn courage? We are born with our fears. You don't have to teach an infant to be suddenly afraid if a dog comes up and barks or bites at him or her. But there are no courageous infants. So, excuse me.
Got it.
So, but the key issue is what you were hinting at, I think. Courage is not the extirpation of fears. It's not getting rid of them, externalizing them. Our fears are essential to our identity and to our success in whatever we choose to do, whether it's work or love. You brought up the military, and if you don't know, I was an infantry commander in the Marines. If you don't know when you're in a danger area, if you can't feel it, bad things will come to you and to your men. So you need to keep your fears, but learn from them, keep them close to you, accept them, and regulate them. The same is true in medicine. I was 35 years in the big medical centers. In medicine, it's a lonely field still, if you're the doctor. But you have to know when you're afraid, when you're not sure. Because then you can always seek help. So the problem is, I'm concerned that we're not teaching courage well enough, and there's multiple steps in all this, but I've come to think that our stories and our examples for our children are key for this. And another related concern I have is that our children's books have all grown slushy and mushy and soft, totally bereft of suspenseful plots, of evil figures, of situations where it looks like it might not turn out well. And I think that children, young children, I'm talking ages 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, they love stories like that. They are tired of stories about a small lamb who got separated from her flock and as a result had a total and utter lamb nervous breakdown and was unable to function for a day. They don't want to hear that. It's too boring.
Fascinating. Fascinating. Yes. When I first started learning a little bit about the difference between fear and courage myself, and recognizing that fear is a valuable thing in life and a natural thing, and that courage is basically a way to face fear. I was in the jungles in the Amazon, and on this little island in the middle of a river, and we knew there was a jaguar in the tree line. We'd been hearing it every night, and it was night, and I thought, well, I'm going to put this to test. I most of my life considered myself fearless, which is, as you would say, is not necessarily a good thing. I mean, I don't know why, but I would just do the craziest things because I wasn't afraid to die or get hurt or whatever. But that could be problematic, obviously. But I wasn't sure if I was courageous, so I walked to the edge of that tree line, and I was frightened. Then I understood fear, and my knees were shaking, and I could hear that jaguar about 10 feet away from me, curious about who I was. And I know we're not on the menu, so we're not really in danger of jaguars, but nonetheless, that's quite an experience, right? So I'm standing there, and I'm everything in my body wanted me to run back to the circle, about 100 yards away of people who were doing a ceremony on the beach there, and I had to muster everything I could to not do that, to just stand there and shake and be in fear and remember that I'm not on the menu, that it's not really out to get me, it's just curious. And I think that's when I first learned the difference, right? That courage is feeling fear, but sort of moving forward anyway, not the fight, flight, or freeze response. What would you?
Yes, now that's a good example. You felt the fear and you knew what it was, but your higher order cortical based regulatory systems kicked in too. You reasoned it through. You didn't go further into those shadows, whatever. So, and if you want to think about the neurology, so the courage is the demonstrated capacity to think, speak, and act in spite of our fears, not without them. The learning of that, I think it starts at about age 3 with the bedtime stories, but it persists and goes well into mid-life sometimes. And one of the, getting back to the military and patrols in Vietnam, the young Marines, they're not like John Wayne, they're 18 years old. They're just big teenagers. And you might think, well, isn't that's not that we should have guys like John Wayne in the Marine. First of all, they're too expensive. They wouldn't, they demand too much money, and
Right.
they wouldn't. But the 18-year-olds don't yet have the full neurology of regulation of fear, emotional ability, whatever, for various reasons. The white matter of the brain isn't complete, at least in boys, until they're 25. So the 18-year-olds have tremendous physical stamina, but if you ask them to do things which are a little bit reckless, which sometimes you do, they'll do it. So I think that's why it fits very well. And the old men in Washington who send us over there, well, they're not going to go over there. You don't see them over there.
That's fascinating. Totally. Yeah. So what I think this is I want to get into the parents of today and how obviously your book could benefit them if they use this. I think it's genius. I think it's critically important, especially since the world isn't necessarily getting safer, so to speak. In other words, yeah, it's there's more complex things happening in the world. There's more things to be afraid of, and I think it's critical for these generations now to learn early. So when you say something like, attempts to calm children down can interrupt the emotional processing rather than support it, what would be the alternative? What should parents do when a child is in a state of terror or fear or what have you? What is the better thing to do?
I'll answer that a little bit as a derivative, John, addressing the parents' fears downstream from the children, and pointing out here that the Bedtime Stories book that I wrote, I'm not sure it's a children's book. I think it might be more a parent's book. But so here's an example I'll tell you. Now I write stories, so I tell them all the time. There's a school district in New Jersey. Are you in New Jersey?
No, I'm presently in California.
Thank goodness. So there's a county in New Jersey called Orange or something, and just about a month ago, the PTA, or the school district governance, outlawed a book, an adolescent novel about a young boy, a teenage boy, who had suicidal thoughts or attempts or even a completed suicide. I don't know. I didn't read the book, but they banned the book. This is no, right-wing conspiracy type county. They banned the book because they were afraid that it might push some of the children in the school, if they read it, to do suicide. Not likely that would happen, but what I would suggest is it's the adults who have the fears here. They're afraid of these topics, including suicide or whatever, and they and their own fears. They have difficulty acknowledging their own fears, and the children need to see the examples we set, not just from the bedtime stories we read and tell, but how we ourselves deal with our fears. And so I would ask, not addressing you directly, but any of the listeners who have children, and we all have children one way or another, except for very few, how often, when the children were young or even teenagers, did you ever say to the children, I am afraid? And the answer, aside from a few colloquialisms like, I'm afraid you're in trouble now, aside from that, which is not really, I am, the answer is probably never. So I would ask, how come? How come you didn't share some of your fears and how you handle them with the children?
Interesting. Yeah. So what is it? Why wouldn't they? Are they?
I don't know. I'm just the book author. I'm not.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you. Okay, I have something to add to this because I think children learn by example, obviously, right? And let's say a parent's terrified of going into an elevator. A child doesn't know an elevator yet from any other room. And and I believe children can sense, all kinds of things whether through facial or body language or God knows, the smell, who knows. But it's like if the child feels that the parent is afraid or the parent admits to being afraid in some way, perhaps the parent is worried that they will pass that fear on to their child, and based on our conversation to this point, that's obviously the wrong approach. You want to teach and exemplify courage. So let's say you're a parent who's terrified of the elevator, you're shaking, you're nervous, it's obvious you're afraid, you might even say I'm afraid, but it's going to be okay. It's nothing bad's going to happen. Let's go ride this elevator together anyway. Seems to me that could both teach the child that it's okay to be afraid, but to keep moving anyway, and that fears are normal, that they're not the only ones afraid of things. I don't know.
Well, yes. So I think we as the grown-ups now have certain strong mythologies about how we need to present ourselves to the children so we'll be a good example. But as you mentioned in your comments, They know who we really are. They may not be able to write a differential equation, but they know who we really are, and we feel that to be who the type of grown, we must have no fears, and we must be omniscient as well as omnipotent. Omniscient. And I would challenge some of the viewers who are or have been parents. How many times did you tell your child in answer to his or her question, "I don't know"? Rare, if at all. Well, wait a minute. We don't know that. The truth is, we don't. Why would we be afraid? These are the fears of us, the grown-ups. Why would we be afraid to let the children know we don't know everything? I'm not sure I know the answer to that question, but I'm pretty sure that's a myth that's out there.
I suspect it maybe have something to do with control, right? If you don't position yourself like a certain, with a certain amount of certainty, then perhaps the child won't respect them. Or I think maybe that's what they're thinking, right? They're trying to do everything they can to keep this kid from just completely telling them, get lost. Who knows? But I wanted to ask you about, you know, yeah, I have my own theories on, how the body or the mind doesn't know the difference between what you're imagining and what is actually happening. And I use this a lot in my work with people to help them to work through things, without having to face the actual situation. Can you elaborate on that? Why imagination, right, can be so powerful?
Um, I'll kind of make a little derivative model, but the question is, this is the question of distortion of communications between us are based on our own prejudice. Prejudice is unconscious. Prejudice is not what it's often said to be by the politicians. We're not fully aware of prejudice and related kind of predispositions, beliefs that are deep in our brain. And people sense what I was a psychotherapist for many years. Even when I was a neuroscientist, I always had a couple of psychotherapy long term. I was kind of psychoanalytic in my approach. I thought it gave a good way to look at things, and it had a treatment for everything, which neurology and neuroscience didn't at that time. But when you do psychotherapy, and one could say every interaction, including what we're doing, is a psychotherapeutic experience. And what you have to do is you just have to try to bracket all the background noise in your brain, all the prejudices that you know of, all the ruminations, all the personal worries. Wait a minute, do I have to go to a dinner party? All this. And you just concentrate totally and utterly on that person and what he or she is saying. And if you do that like at a cocktail party, you'd be surprised how popular you become very quickly.
Interesting. So focusing your attention. This reminds
Listen.
me.
Yeah, listen.
I have a story like that where I was in college and a bunch of us decided to go spelunking, which was, to go down into a cave. It was the Calaveras. I can't remember where it was, somewhere in California. And you rope down 200 feet into this giant cavern, and then they had these tiny little holes that you'd go through. And one was called the meat grinder. It kind of turned, and you had to turn your body. And claustrophobia is a thing, right? I mean, there's people that went in there and panicked and died, from that. So it was kind of serious, and I didn't realize, being a crazy college kid, just how serious it was. But I went for it anyway, and I got to a point in this one section of the cave where before you get to the meat grinder, there's like two slabs, and your tiny little thing, and you're shimmying through, and your nose is about that far from the top. And if you think for a second that I am 200 feet underground in a tiny little hole, you're done. You're done for, right? And it's hard not. And I did not want to panic and die down there like that. So what I figured out was if I just focus on each individual grain of the granite that was right in front of my eye, and I started analyzing them like a scientist. Oh, look at that one. Oh, that's interesting. As I was moving through this part of the thing, then I'd be okay. And sure enough, it worked. It was fascinating to just focus on this minutest thing so that my mind didn't go to the overall situation, which was horrible. Um, I don't know if I could do that again. I'm pretty sure I couldn't do that again today. But that's how I got through it. So what you told us reminds me of that you can use your imagination, right? Use your tool to put yourself, exactly where you want to be in any situation, such that you mitigate the overall fear.
Hearing that story, John, I can say you would have fit in very well with my Marine platoon in Vietnam.
I bet. I tried to get into the military. All my family, my favorite uncle Jack was a forward scout in the Vietnam War. He was a colonel ultimately, but man, his stories, whew, it's amazing. Amazing what you guys did, had to do. Do you have any other thoughts about essentially um, what parents can do differently when their child is facing uncertainty, illness, or change? Something this I see this a lot too. I'm comfortable with change. Not everybody is. Even when I was a kid, I was comfortable with change. When we were going to move, I was like, this is going to be exciting. It's an adventure. But
Yeah.
I've seen the opposite. I've
Yeah.
seen kids absolutely panic.
Yeah. I'll move forward in time from toddlerhood, where my book, Bedtime Stories, is about, and just give some comments about adolescent parenting. By the way, parenting is the most difficult task that we have. It's more difficult than being a spouse. It's more difficult than work. It's because what's required always changes, and each child's individual. All right, drop all that. One of my complaints about modern life is the myth that for our teenage children, it's quality time that counts. What a bunch of baloney. What counts is quantity and predictability. Like, you can't say, well, Sunday morning at 10, I'm going to talk with, my daughter Mary about whatever, the facts of life. I'll make an appointment with her and we'll do it. You can try that, but it doesn't work because she's not. What you have to do is, to the extent you can, just be in one place that's centrally located, not totally self-affected, like maybe before dinner or after dinner, and they'll walk by and ignore you for 100 nights, and then all of a sudden she'll sit down and turn to you and say, Dad, am I pretty?
Amazing. Amazing. Wow. So it's funny because I just read an article about how to make friends with crows, and it's a very similar strategy. you you sit in one place consistently. You bring a little food, and you wait till the crow decides it wants to cozy up to you and
That
feel
sounds like
safe.
a book. That sounds like a book I should read, Making Friends with Crows.
It was a cool article I just read. But yeah, so that's so so. Explain more about it's not the quality, it's the quantity.
It's quantity and being available,
Mhm.
not working at your desk, trading stock futures or whatever, and being receptive, not intrusive. The idea is, or other ways you can think of, the meaningful interactions, major transformative interactions with the parent. There's not a whole lot of them, and they can't be predicted. So the children will come to you if you're there, available, receptive, and when they come on their schedule, the impact is much greater.
It's amazing. I love that. That reminds me of something we learned in our shamanic training, which is people will not hear the answer to a question they have not asked.
Right. But what does shamanic mean?
Shamanic is it's one word in one language, the Tungus language. They call them shamans, but every village around the world since the beginning of time has had one person born in the village who was a little different, right? Could see things other people couldn't. They became the psychologists, they became the doctors, they became the medicine people. I got specific training in a certain set of techniques from a group of people in Peru called the Queros, small tribe, very that have very ancient. They've been isolated, so they go back 15,000 years, and they sort of have kept a lot of their things. So I use that word to describe a training that I guess would best be considered sort of a deep psychology, right? Sort of including not only our subconscious, but on some level they consider also energy fields around the body and stuff like that. But the training is intense. The training is all about the same kind of training you'd have to go through as a psychologist or psychiatrist or a coach or anyone working with people, where you have to learn to manage those gifts. Like I just said, not shove them down people's throats, not stop somebody in the grocery store and say, looks like you might have symptoms of, bipolar disorder. Maybe I should talk. You can't you can't do that, right? You have to wait till it's an appointment. You have to create a safe space, and so that's just one of the little anecdotes that I remember. Based on this story you told of the daughter coming to the father, and that is that if they're not ready or they're not asking, they're not going to really receive it, right? They're not going
And
to
you
take
can't
the
force
word right
people,
away.
you can't order people into psychotherapy, which I think the courts think they can do now sometimes. I mean, you can do it, but it's fatuous. It doesn't accomplish
Yeah.
much.
And of course, storytelling is huge in the shamanic traditions because this is the way, parables and storytelling of all kinds and using your imagination, because that's how we access the subconscious, right? It's not prose, it's poetry. It's imagery and symbols and
I think
stories.
I've heard Freud would tell stories
Yeah.
now and then. He was much more active than, psychoanalysis became a school, whatever. But he would interrupt his patients to tell anecdotes and things. Pretty sure I heard from people who had known him that he would do, or had been treated by him, that he would do that. The psychotherapeutic skills might be universal: engagement, listening, understanding, but then I think we individualize it too. Those of us who really have worked at it over a lifetime, we kind of develop our own ways, and that's because we're using ourselves as the therapeutic tool. So some of the things you're talking about in that shamanic school, not too different from psychoanalysis.
Right. I love that. And it's interesting you said it this way too, how the psychologist, or in my case the shaman or whatever, will engage with each client. It's critically important that it becomes individualized. And I think this is an argument for why AI isn't going to be the best psychologist, right? Which is the latest new subject, right? Of
It's going to
can
be
it be
terrible. It's going to be
can
horrible. And the AI writing is crap. I've looked at some of it. I have
yeah.
this fancy computer. I'm talking with you on it too. I had to buy it to do these podcasts, and it keeps, when I'm writing on it, it interrupts and it says, "Are you sure you wouldn't like us? I don't know who us. I don't know who's in the computer. Are you sure you wouldn't like us to write this paragraph?" And you can't talk back to it, but of course I'm sure, because you can't write very well. But
That's
there's no
that's
one I can tell it
amazing.
to.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
No, I mean honestly, because it's that nuance of recognizing a moment when a particular story will hit with your client, right? That you could, and it really does. I'm so excited about your book, and because it is the storytelling that really gets to the deepest part of us. That's the most, is the roots of our struggles, right? And you want to, we call it going furthest upstream. If you can if you can get deeper and deeper into the subconscious and make the changes there, then it becomes much easier for the person on a conscious level to do the things they need to do.
Yes, and the stories, I know it's probably time for just the stories are so powerful. I'll risk making a political comment. Our terrible political divides now is because we have lost our shared stories about our nation. And that's something it's happened before, but not for a very long time. And we're struggling to get a shared story and not doing very well. If you don't have that, you don't have the values for a political discussion.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely.
I'm no politician, but I think that's one of the problems down there in Washington now.
I love that because again that's going further upstream instead of trying to figure out how to clean the swamp. You go upstream and you wiggle your finger with a good story and the whole thing. Well, I agree that's a very profound statement that we need shared stories. I think that's
Lincoln told many stories to diffuse conflict and facilitate, what he felt they had to do. And now many of our politicians, they're afraid to tell a story because they're afraid that they'll make it inappropriate and distasteful. And actually, for most of them, they probably would.
that's a that's a good point. It's really difficult these days. I mean, you and I are come from a generation that uh we I think we weren't as offendable, right? We didn't worry too much about the little mishaps and the little misstatements and things that nowadays, I mean, you got to watch every single thing you say because somebody's going to make an issue about it, and that is unfortunate. But in addition to your wonderful book, right? Bedtime stories that will terrify children, which I absolutely love. I think that's just the best, and it's important. How would you recommend, adult listeners, if you will, besides, in addition to reading your book, because I do believe it's valuable for everyone. Um, but how do we get that storytelling back? What would be your sage, recommendation for people to develop? I mean, should they go back and read Shakespeare again? I mean, I thought that was valuable for me. I mean, I loved the classics. I mean, how do you develop a storytelling muscle?
I don't. I don't have the answer to that, John. I don't have the answer. I suppose you try. You whatever. The book. There are 8 stories in the book that I wrote. I told told the stories 35 years ago, but I wrote. Each one does have an underlying theme of what I consider the major cardinal virtues of our civilization: courage, generativity, um, selflessness, responsibility. Yes, it was a terrible mistake, and I am responsible. We never hear those words from our leaders in business, in the universities, or in politics. When we hear someone say that, we will know that we have found our leader. But
Amazing.
I'm still waiting.
Well, we got to keep, as you say, it's happened before. People have to have that perspective and know that all is not lost. That there's a chance we will return, and you're certainly, I think, an important contributor to that. And I can't thank you enough for your work and for your life of work and your life of service, right? In all respects, and you know, I know you even now mentioned that you're doing these podcasts and things, and it's kind of a new thing. It's new for me as well. I mean, this is all very foreign to me in a way compared to the young people today. But what's next for you? What do your
I guess I'm going to do the books. And now I got this one. I actually have three other books. I've been writing book. I left medicine 15 years ago. I've been writing non-science book. I have three others, and I think I have this great publisher, the O'Mara Press in Canada. I think we're going to push this one this year, and then there are three others coming. One about medicine, one about the war, and the last one, which I'm working on, which I think I'm not going to talk about because it's bad karma to talk about it.
Okay, good. I appreciate that. Well, I guess a good time to wrap it up here. And again, thank you so very much for all that you do. And I'll look forward to sharing your work and this book in particular. And we'll is there the book is published now, right?
Yeah, it's out. If they want to, people want to see it. I have a website. I didn't make it, the publisher, but it's fabulous. I sometimes don't recognize. Anyway, the website, if you have a computer, is randolphschiffer.com, and then all this stuff comes up about the person I wished that I had been.
That's wonderful. You are that person, and we need more of you. We need more. So yeah, thank you. Randolphschiffer.com, and we'll I'll post that on all the links here and stuff. So
And thank you for your kind words. John, I've enjoyed it.
thank you. Have a beautiful rest of your day.
All right, you too. Bye bye.
Take care.